And I say that because there's no bio in our book tonight for Ron. So I said, what should I say? Can I just make stuff up? He told me I could.
Yep.
But I'm not going to do that. We're very fortunate to have Ron with us tonight. Ron has been involved in New Thought movements, science of the mind, spiritualism for, I won't say how many years.
I will.
Okay,
50.
50, which is pretty remarkable.
I'm tired.
Yeah, and he's been such a blessing this summer. He has spoken so many times at the 2:30 service. So it is a joy. So here are the two things he told me I could tell you. He loves his mom, and he was friends with Pope John Paul. So I'll let him fill in the rest.
Spiritually speaking, of course.
So Ron Skowronski.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm all right here. Anyway, good evening. It is a privilege to be here. And you know, I heard someone say today that, you know, they were so grateful that they found this sanctuary. And you know, it's funny, I've been aware of it and involved in it in a variety of different ways since its very beginning. And I can honestly say it is probably one of my favorite places to be because of the kind of kindness, compassion, love, and a genuine search for truth, a genuine search for, in a safe, extremely comfortable way, so that people can feel free to be themselves without critique or judgment. And as I speak to you a little bit later, you'll find out just how uncommon that really is in today's world. So I'm grateful to be here. You know, it's funny. Gentleman had mentioned that we still have a few weeks of summer. And my first thought was, yes, keep your cotton picking pumpkin spice to yourselves. I went to the market and I saw this on the shelf and I bought one because it proved to me that the end of the world is nigh. We're done. It's over. Because I saw this, I knew we were heading toward Omega. Pumpkin spice flavored ramen. It's one of those things that I bought it, I did. I paid $1.89, I remember correctly. And they will unearth it maybe in my grave or somewhere in 500 years from now, because there is no way on God's green earth anyone's ever going to have the courage to eat it. But nonetheless, I mentioned, and I smile on my face when I mentioned it. I have been involved in Lilydale Assembly in one form or another for 50 years. Now, I know I'm still slender and fascinating, and I still have my boyish good looks, my wry sense of humor, and my impish grin. I do, don't I? Yes, Ron. Thank you, children. But seriously, I came to Lilydale when I was about 16 years old. I joined the Spiritualist church illegally. I told them I was 18. I was actually 17. That's how impressed I was, and I will use the term unashamedly, impressed by the Spirit, where this is where I needed to be. Not so much Lilydale per se, but within the pall, within the loving arms and the grandeur, and I use that term unashamedly, of modern spiritualism. And so began the journey that took and still is continuing for over now half a century. And it is difficult for me at times to contemplate that it has been that long. I mean, you hear people say it all the time. I heard it when I was 20, when people in their 60s and 70s would go, where have the years gone? And I am now repeating that same mantra. Where have all the years gone? Well, hopefully they have gone to experience, to growth, to learning, and sharing with others those lessons so that their journey may be a bit easier than perhaps mine was. You all know that if you've embarked on the study of the paranormal, the psychic, the mystical, that it is not nor ever has been an easy path. It is wrought with people who will make fun of it, who will be angry at it, and who will even in some, thank goodness, rare cases, I've seen be willing to perpetrate violence against it. So if anybody ever tells you, oh yeah, sure, you went that way, oh, that must have been fun, you can assure them, no, it wasn't. But what was, I won't use the word fun, what was at the so-called not end of the journey, but as the journey has progressed and the years have flown by, you understand more and more and more what it is that you have, in a sense, sacrificed is nothing compared to what you have gained. And hopefully you will gain the inner essence of the teachings of those who have gone before us. Not just the so-called verbiage or the rhetoric of a religious language, but you will gain an insight into their experience, the experience of a Christ, the experience of a Buddha, the experience of those who have gone on perhaps and pioneered, as the spiritualist pioneers did from 1848 to basically even to the present. And also other pioneers like Dr. Ernest Holmes, who was the founder of the religious science movement. And even people like Mary Baker Eddy, who frankly would have nothing to do with the New Thought movement and had very little respect for spiritualism, even in her study under Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, the father of what we would call metaphysics, would acknowledge principles and values that we adhere to today. So we may not, we have hopefully, as the late, many of you don't know this name, perhaps some of you do, the late Dr. Ernest Schoenfeld, who was the minister of the Spiritualist Church in Chicago, Illinois, and at the time a member of the Board of Trustees of the National Spiritualist Association of Churches. He would say that ultimately, forgive me for just a moment, that all of those who have come before us, we stand, for example, on the shoulders of giants. We stand on the shoulders of giants. So what is it after this period of time? What have I want to share with you, for example, a few of the insights perhaps that I've received that may help you in your continued journey and those people you ultimately, pardon me, 2 shots and a chaser, right? Okay. Yeah, those were the days. A different kind of spirit. Excuse me. After, you and all of you have gone through parts of this. I am, for lack of a better term, preaching to the choir. What I'm going to share with you is something you're going to identify with. It's not going to be something out of your experience. But you go through the years, over the years, and what do? What do we all do? I will bet you each one of you owns at least 100 books on metaphysics, spirituality, spiritualism, and related subject matter. At least 100 books. And those of you who don't own 100 books, you've gotten rid of some of those books. You just haven't told anybody about it. But ultimately, you have collected a lot of books. And over that period of time, some of it has proved to be extremely enlightening, and others have been, as in all religious traditions and all searches for truth, they've been confusing. There are contradictions, and you go, wait a minute, this book said that book said that, what's the truth? One of the biggest controversies that still exists today, though some do not agree with me that it's controversy, is the issue of reincarnation. There are spiritually oriented individuals, spiritualists, by the way, and others related to spiritualism, who will deny it as a what I'll call a doctrinal truth. And others, of course, will say, I heard one fellow a little crudely say, well, you gotta be stupid not to believe in reincarnation. I didn't believe in it then, and I don't believe it now, but, well, yes, I do. And, there's kind of, there's always, it's not a flip-flop. It's striving to discern how do people come to these conclusions? We have an interesting motto. It's an unofficial motto. One of the things our chairperson didn't mention is that over the years, I went from being, I'm a great, I use the bit of humor, I'm a close personal friend of the Pope and such, but I went from being an exceedingly dogmatic clergyman, and you have no idea how dogmatic, to one of the most liberal, open-minded, open-ended that I am today. So I went from studying, teaching, preaching spiritualism, which I still do, to become an ordained minister over the last 25 years in the United Church of Religious Science, which I still do. And if you're ever interested, on any given Sunday, I am now the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Fredonia, New York. This will be my second year as their minister. And people go, how do you do that? Spiritually flexible, that's how you do that. Because the lesson I learned ultimately, and this is the unofficial motto of the church, is your guess is as absolutely valid as my guess. Because if we all were honest with each other and we looked in the mirror, we're all guessing. We think we have the truth. We know we have the truth. And then 10 years later, you look back and you go, I don't know. I don't think I believe as much of that anymore. And then we feel guilty because we have somehow besmirched the good name of our faith. No, you've done something called grown. You've done something called change. Survival of the fittest is nonsense. There's no such thing. The best way to be the best human being you possibly can be is to not be the toughest, strongest, bad boy or bad girl on the block. Survival of the fittest. Argue your way through things, fight your way through things. No, the people who have always survived and always will continue to survive are going to be the people who are most apt to be able to change, to adapt to their environment. So the way I changed was I started adapting to these various environments because I was still interested. It's that song like YouTube from, I believe the group is, God, I'm an old guy. I should know these rock and roll stars. YouTube? No. U2. I still haven't found what I'm looking for. What does that mean? In here, I've come to truths. I've come to understand certain things. I've come to believe certain things. I've rejected other things. I'm always in that process, though. And yet I can do it comfortably enough personally where I can fundamentally represent three. Now they're dynamically similar. You have to understand that. It's not like, being able to be a hardcore vegetarian and a hardcore carnivore and saying, yep, I do both. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I eat meat. On Wednesdays and Fridays, I eat vegetables. No, but the things that you do is, if there is that commonality, which there is for me, I can still represent and help, hopefully, people move in a direction where we can say, I'm going, and this is Ernst Schoenfeld again from Chicago, let's agree to disagree, but let us do so without becoming disagreeable. And so that those years have passed by, the different studies and groups, and I've even been on I don't recommend this for everybody because it isn't for everybody. I've done fire walking. I've walked on hot coals 3 or 4 different times. Couple of times, ouch, 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 I wasn't ready, okay? And it was just simply fire walking injury. Other times, mystical experience, authentic for me. Just to name one thing, but there have been so many others. And I always tell people, though, at the end of the day, what's going to, and perhaps it's already happened for you, you will have amassed so many books that they're not going to mean that much anymore. You're going to start giving them away, selling them if you want to. You're going to have some, what I call core books that are always going to touch your heart, always going to speak to your soul. And you're going to start engaging in groups and activities that are going to become more, not less, universal. Where people, you've heard the kids, and I say the kids, say, you be you and I'll be me. And that's going to be okay. And again, going back to, we're going to disagree without becoming disagreeable. And it's going to be okay. Because we're all realizing that we're what? Evolving. We're moving forward. People are scared out of their wits now. They're scared of what's going to happen in November politically, whichever side you're on. Each side is terrified of what's going to happen to them. And yet, most of the scripture in Christianity, Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, and so forth, encourages people to do what? Be still and know that I am. Have faith. Faith in what? That God is love. And if God is love and you are an expression of that God, then therefore you are love. So what must you do in order for everything to come together? You must, as the Nazarene said, seek ye first the kingdom of God. Where is that? Within you. And all things will be added unto you. Do we do it? No. Because we are spiritual beings who decided to have a human experience. And our human experience is largely, hate to admit it, but it's mine too, ego-driven. And the ego says, things are going to change. No, you can't be, no, you've got to protect yourself. No. We have striven all this time, and it's coming down to the most universal, the most basic. And one of the things I say to people, especially young people, because young folks do not like to hear preaching. They like to have examples set, and they like to hear the logic and the practicality of those examples. So you can say, well, it says in this holy book, it says in that holy book. And they're going to say, who says and who cares? They're going to want something, they're going to want the rubber to hit the road, much like they did in the 60s. And then they got to be older, and they reincorporated themselves in the same old, and there was growth, but as a rule, things pretty much stayed the same, because the ego likes everything the same. So here we go. We go where to find that God? We go within. And in that place, that still small voice, as Edgar Cayce called it, will speak to us. Will speak to us. Now, does that mean your spirit guides, your teachers, your departed loved ones, that they suddenly become irrelevant? Of course it doesn't. Those are I'll use the poetic language, those are the ministering angels that are sent to deal with us because we are human in our orientation. There are no atheists in foxholes. You can talk about God as pure consciousness, totality, impersonal. Guess what? When the bullets are flying, literally or figuratively, you're on your knees going, oh God, save me. It becomes very personal because we are persons and we identify with everything personally. Doesn't make you suddenly some kind of a spiritual pygmy. It makes you a human being a spiritual being who's having a human experience. So, going back to the notion of simplicity, I have come to the conclusion that how you can best find God, so to speak, is what has always been the standard. The standard. Go within. 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night. Not right before you go to bed. You'll become a nervous wreck. Your energy goes up. You do what? You go within. And you strive to understand the God of not my understanding, your understanding. And if you do this with consistency and regularity, and whether it be a man like Yeshua, Jesus, or it be someone like, used to be, and people, they make fun of him, but because there were some pitfalls along the way, but Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who the Beatles went to and so forth, that's the whole thing. Meditation, slow down, Eckhart Tolle, and so many others. Master Eckhart, the great, I believe, 16th century, I believe 16th century, 13th? Oh, that's a couple of centuries. But seriously, he was very big on the concept of going within, slowing down, identifying with what, who, and what you are at core. Now, one last thing I'll share with you that I think is very significant, and I hope it impinges itself upon you in a positive way. What is the thing that I see more often than not as I move and groove, as it were, in our culture? I say, because of that, I call it scared rabbit syndrome. People are so scared, so scared. They don't know what's coming. Right, left, or, all the problems, religiously, politically, economically, all of it. And yet, it's like we suddenly develop spiritual amnesia. We don't remember the teachings. We don't remember the encouragement. What is encouragement? To give you courage to move forward, to have faith in that still small voice, to, as it says, be still and know that I am. I am. And so what happens is ultimately, though, I tell folks, look, pick something that's easy to do and yet simultaneously will challenge you every day of your life, and just do it. And I even say fake it till you make it, because we've got to change our thinking to change our life. And what is the thing that I suggest? Simply, kindness. The Dalai Lama says, kindness is my religion. By the way, not new. Thomas Paine, great American political, I call him a theologian. He's got an enormous amount of religious and spiritual convictions people should become aware of. He said, the world is my home. To do good is my religion. And of course, Leo Tolstoy, great Russian author, great Russian apologist for goodness and understanding the human condition. He says, and forgive me for paraphrasing, he says, there is nothing in the human condition that will not change if you give it enough kindness. So what I'm going to suggest to you as I conclude this evening, is two things. Take your experience as I have taken mine, and look upon it as part of your journey, part of your ride through this life. And then say to yourself, all right, I need to keep it simple. And forget about the books. I mean, they were good, they worked, etc. But find some simple disciplines, spiritual disciplines. And of course, again, I recommend the two: meditation, first and foremost, and choose random acts of kindness at least once a day. Now, simply, if it was easy, everybody'd be doing it. But it isn't easy. That's why it's called a spiritual discipline. But if we were to do those things, and I said this to a group I was preaching to last Saturday in the auditorium, if you do what I've suggested for 1 month, 30 full days, and then, if you can find a way, continue to make it part of your habits, like your morning coffee or your morning shower or what have you, I will guarantee you that if you come back to this forgive me, come back to this sanctuary a year from now, and we all have a chance to meet and greet each other, that you will be able to tell me, without a single exception, not one exception, that your lives have changed significantly. And as I've said many times, not just to prepare for the greater life to come, which is the gospel of spiritualism. That's significant. That's incredibly important. But what is equally significant and what is equally important is to create a world that ultimately works for you, where you can have the same joy here that you are anticipating in the hereafter, but ultimately be part of the process of, I've said this many times because it's part of my religious science tradition, to work for a world that ultimately works for everybody. No exceptions. Because as it says in the scripture, if one of us is raised, we are all raised up. And yet, if just one of us is somehow diminished, we are all diminished. Let us commit to arise. Thank you.
Thank you.